Hello and welcome to another Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. Luke Taylor here, and I am live in Napa. I told my wife when I was driving to this next guest's fine property that I kind of stumble in the beginning because I look at these views and it's remarkable. This is like my happy place. Plus my wife and kids aren't around, so that's probably why it's so happy. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcast platform. Also follow us on YouTube. Like us, subscribe, so every week you get a new episode, or when we hit a new episode, you get it. And also, too, we are very proud and excited to have partner with Silvadore Brands. They are the official wine preserver of the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. As an extremely effective and affordable wine preserver, whatever you want, wherever you want. 100% Argon Silvadore Wine Preserver allows you to do just that. Go to silvadorebrands.com and click the for your home to order. When checking out, enter Cork and Taylor in the discount code, and you receive 10% off your next order. So don't forget to do that, and all the links will be below. So I'm here with a legend. He's only said he's been here for 58 harvests. That's it?
So far.
So far.
Yeah.
You're going to be here for another 58.
I'll work at it.
I'm here with Ren Harris from Paradigm in lovely Oakville. Lovely Oakville.
Yes.
Your family goes back in California to 1769.
Correct.
Your wife's family goes back in Napa to 1890.
Yes.
So you're saying you know a little bit about Napa.
Hopefully.
What is Paradigm?
Paradigm as a definition would be a model or pattern for perfection of a given entity or substance or way of life, perhaps.
Yeah.
And we came upon the name after struggling, not wanting to name this after ourselves.
Why not?
I like to keep a lower profile,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Okay.
We came up with a lot of names that we liked, but were trademarked. And we put the word out around 1990 that if somebody came up with a name when we released our wine and we used their name, we'd send them a case every year until they died or I died. And a recently retired banker from Boston, Jim Dillon, and his wife were out visiting us, and they came up with the name Paradigm, and this is 2023, and neither one of us have died, although we did lose Sue Dillon, but
Yeah.
Jim is still alive, and it's been a very successful name for us.
So
And,
what do you send them each year for the case?
generally a case of Cabernet.
Okay. So so this vineyard, or this 55 acres, correct? Four continuous parcels, correct?
4 contiguous parcels, yes.
Okay. So I think it's very interesting because Oakville's not really known for any of these varietals that was first planted. Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Pinot Noir, and white Riesling. I thought Riesling was only white.
It was.
So what made you decide to rip all that out?
Well, number one, we kept the Pinot Noir the longest, but they were becoming older, and also the entire industry back when I started in the mid-'60s was geared, if you're a grape grower, to tonnage. Chenin Blanc, for instance, would easily get 10 plus tons per acre, and I could get $600 a ton for Chenin Blanc from my friend Don Chapelet at the time. And if I had Cabernet here at the time, I'd have gotten about $800 a ton. But that was about 4 tons per acre.
Yeah.
And also, we used to plant timed on sequential ripening, so it didn't all become ripe at once. So you would generally start off with Chardonnay, followed pretty quickly by Pinot Noir, and depending on the crop size, one or the other might come in first. Chenin Blanc was next, White Riesling last. Plus, they were early season ripeners generally compared to Cabernets. And you were at less danger of running into rain and issues weather-wise if you had earlier varietals. So between sequential ripening and early ripeners, that was a good way to go.
Yeah. That's me. I never thought of it like that.
Well, you're talking to an 81-year-old man today, but I remember those days.
Yeah, you're 28, big guy.
Yeah.
28. Is there any white Riesling in Napa anymore?
Yes.
There is?
I think so.
Where is it? Are you hiding some in the back somewhere?
No. There's still a little bit on my wife's family's ranch.
Okay.
And I believe Phelps has some, I think.
Really? Okay.
I might be wrong about that.
Okay.
I planted Phelps back in 74 when I was doing custom farming for a lot of people. And we definitely planted it then, and I hadn't heard that they'd pulled it out.
Wow.
The Kennefic Ranch had some too. I don't think that's there any longer, however.
Wow. So how did you get it? I mean, did you just kind of grow up in the business?
No. I grew up in San Francisco, born and raised, and my wife went to a girls' boarding school down there, but she was born right here in Napa Valley at what used to be called the St. Lena Sanitarium. It's now the St. Lena Hospital.
Okay.
Sanitarium tag goes back to when it was for tuberculosis patients. And
Wow.
that nature. But that's on our birth certificate, St. Lena Sanitarium. But anyway, we met in high school in 1958. And the good Dominican nuns weren't stupid, and they had one phone for the entire high school. And I did hang in there for a little while, trying to get through, and every once in a while, I guess maybe I succeeded, but there was too many other things going on. So we went out a few times in high school, I suppose, but we hooked up again when Marilyn was a senior in college at San Francisco State, and we got married in '65. And she taught fourth grade down in San Francisco area.
Wow.
And I'd worked my way through in construction. In fact, even when I was still in school, I did a lot of estimating, not so much for estimating labor, but estimating quantities, because I was pretty good with a slide rule, which we used to have in those days. Mm-hmm. And I could earn all of $3 or $4 an hour in my spare time by taking quantities of lumber or sheetrock or whatever off of plans. And I kept on in that and wound up actually doing and overseeing a lot of the work. And I guess my most noteworthy job as I got a chance to bid for ABC, NBC, and CBS, the Republican National Convention in 1964. And I built their broadcast booths.
Cool.
And then the Republican Central Committee put me to work building things like platforms and stairs and stuff while I was there.
Wow.
And that was kind of fun, being part of all that. Barry Goldwater was nominated as a candidate at the time, and I enjoyed the experience, and the whole job centered around 3 sheets of glass that were 10 feet by 30 feet and unbreakable and bulletproof. And they had one manufacturer in Northern California that handled this particular glass, and there was only one glass company in the world that could make glass to those specs at that time. And I got a bid from the local dealer. It was in San Francisco for Northern California. And I forget the numbers exactly, but it seemed exorbitantly high, like $50,000. Mm-hmm. And so I figured, what the heck? I phoned the guy in Southern California. He came in at less than half. So I used his bid. and saved about something close to $20,000 on the bid. None of the other competitive bidders did that, and I got the job by $2,000. So I thought I was pretty proud of myself there. It was my one claim to fame in the construction business.
So what brought you to this piece of property? I mean, it's absolutely stunning.
Well, as I said, my wife and I were employed in San Francisco, and my wife became pregnant and decided she didn't want to raise kids in the fog. And and we had bought a house and fixed it up. So we sold the home, made a few dollars, and came up here and with the help of Andy Del Mondio, a guy who had run the family ranch going back into the 30s, took me under his wing, and we planted a prune orchard my wife and I had purchased to grapes without ever picking a prune. And it was fun, and I liked living up here, and I love the community feel of Napa Valley as a whole. It's like one big small town. Not a lot of people, but spread out, and all doing the same thing, helping each other, marrying each other on occasion.
So it hasn't changed much.
It's changed, in that the owners are certainly a different breed of people. I'm a real throwback, as is my wife's family, and there are others around. But what I did when I landed here and got the prune orchard going into vineyards, I picked up on that a lot. Andy Del Mondio was the ultimate mentor and quite a gentleman. And I went back to school, learned a few odds and ends, picked up some rudimentary Spanish in the field, which was necessary.
Yep.
And I proceeded to start farming for other people, doing a lot of planting. As I mentioned, I think I planted Phelps.
Wow.
And also bought and sold a few places for my wife and I. And a gentleman by the name of Roland Twilliger, known as Twig to the locals, was my broker, and very helpful and good guy to deal with. And he came to me one day and said, "Ren, I got to retire. I'm getting too old for this. You ought to get a license." At the time, I was very active in Farm Bureau. In fact, I think I was the president of Napa County Farm Bureau at the time, and I did, and I partnered up with Gene Phillips as a business partner, who had a dress company, sewed dresses and sold them all over the country and outside, I guess. Anyway, we went to work, and given my connections in the farming world and the people that knew me, because I'd active in Farm Bureau and other things, and we got pretty much most all the listings for vineyards that came up for sale.
Really?
And Jeannie could sell snowmen to an Eskimo, and so we had entire transactions for about a 25-year period.
Really?
Sold something, don't know the number, something in excess of 60 or 70 vineyards that became wineries or parts of wineries.
Wow.
In that period of time.
Why'd you get out of it? You'd be hot right now.
No, it's changed.
Yeah.
I was selling property for a bunch of people that were retiring and were maybe too old to farm and wanted to live on what they'd kept over the years, and I sold them to other folks. But pretty soon it was going to people that made a lot of money elsewhere.
Yeah.
This was they kept the same people working and running the vineyards, but the owners weren't working farmers.
Well, you know how you make $1 million in the wine business? You start with 5
Yeah.
million. That is.
Yeah. Well, there's some it's gotten
It's
crazy.
different, right? It is. It's different, and it's amazing. You might have planted some of these vineyards
for
what they're selling for. It's almost ridiculous. Like, how are you going to make the money back?
It is ridiculous. I could sell 1 acre of 55 today for double what I paid for 55 acres.
I know. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. Back in 75. Yeah.
And you're seeing some of these things, like Schaefer, what that sold for is like $300 million.
Something like that.
I mean, it was something ridiculous. And it's like, okay, so what's going to happen to the wine quality?
Well, I believe the same people are still there. Yeah, you don't know.
I mean, that's the...
You don't know. I think Napa Valley has still got some great old names. We talked earlier. You mentioned several of the places that I'd actually sold.
Yep.
People I've worked with over the years. And
you said Chapelet. I mean, they've been around for a while.
Well, Chapelet, I didn't sell that. Don.
But I mean, you know.
Oh no,
right?
And Molly's still alive.
Right.
She's in her 90s. I think she's 93.
But it's still family owned, right? Cyril's there, and I mean, there's still family. His son. I mean, you look at. I'm interviewing Paloma. You might not know them personally, but that's third. It's going to be third generation. So at least you're seeing some of that, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the dying breed, but it still is happening.
Yeah. It is, and there are several others you had mentioned earlier. Pride. That's another one that sold. It's in 2 counties, actually.
Yeah, Sonoma and Napa. I want to ask him which he likes better, Napa or Sonoma.
They dodge that question, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to ask him. Come on, Steve. I got all day, Steve.
But no, now it's property doesn't change hands through a mere real estate broker any longer. It's corporate attorneys. And
it's different, huh?
Yeah, very different. And also, well, the whole reason that any of this took place and the boom occurred in values and wine quality has got to do with the ag preserve that was passed in a zoning law in 1968. But for that, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking.
Yeah.
We were starting to witness a lot of subdividing where you could chop off quarter-acre lots and get way more than you could for a vineyard, and property taxes were about to go through the roof. And Napa Valley was going to become Silicon Valley North or a bedroom community or both. And my father-in-law, Andy Palissa, was a planning commissioner for the county at the time. And he bemoaned what was coming down the pike. And so the Ag Preserve was proposed, and the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors had a series of hearings, I think half a dozen apiece. I attended all of them. And my father-in-law was a very conservative fellow. However, even though it smacked of socialism, the Ag Preserve worked for him. And he was the only farmer on either board, and he voted for it, he very enthusiastically so.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, no more quarter-acre parcels. Ooh, it's now 40 acres. If you want to split your property, you better have 80, because you can't lop off a parcel smaller than 40. Oh. And when you get into the hills, the parcel sizes become even bigger.
Really?
Yeah. And but for that, we'd have gone the way of, as I say, San Jose, San Mateo. When I was a kid, my dad came home from the war along with several uncles. We used to take a car down to, we called it Santa Clara, and buy apricots and cherries. And those days are long gone.
Yeah.
But the Ag Preserve changed that. And one interesting event happened about the middle of the set of hearings that went on at the Planning Commission level. A guy that represented, I think it might have been the Fall River Estate, anyways, a trustee, was speaking adamantly and strongly against the Ag Preserve at all these meetings, on and on. you're depriving people of their rights and on.
Yep.
And all of a sudden he came to a meeting and was all in favor of the Ag Preserve, 100%.
Someone got to him.
Well, John Trefethen's father, said, I'll pay you what you're asking, full purchase price, all cash. And he gave him a check for $1 deposit, but only if the Ag Preserve passes. Otherwise, I don't want it.
No way.
Because he already lost out in Walnut Creek. There were no more walnut trees.
Yeah.
And they were disappearing walnut. He didn't want that to happen again. So all of a sudden, bingo. And we had Jack Davies from Schwamsburg there.
I'm actually going to go see his son right after you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he spoke eloquently and often at these meetings in favor of it. Because he wanted to see, he knew we had someplace special here, as did my father-in-law, and spoke in favor of it strongly, as I say. And right as soon as that passed, I went on behalf of my wife's family, and I put together the first that I knew of at the time. We talked about bottle price formulas, where the price you're going to pay for grapes was going to be based on what he got for a bottle of champagne, as they called it. Now it's sparkling wine, of course. And in that contracting agreement goes back to 1969, and and we're still living by it. Both
That's crazy.
Schwamsburg and our family, yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah. And then we started to see people taking this investment here as a long-term investment. And all of a sudden, maybe sequential ripening and heavy tonnage wasn't the way to make a world-class wine and get the most money for your grapes. And things started to happen. Paris tasting was a real big one. I'm not too sure there would have even been one. But for the Ag Preserve being here and those grapes being, all of a sudden, Cabernet was an honored variety, even though it was low tonnage. And at the same time, when the Planning Commission was passed the Ag Preserve law, my father-in-law came down off the podium and he says, okay, Ren, we got to make this thing work. Because he knew the alternative was going to be subdivisions. And it has.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
Yeah. And my first tour that, I sat down with my father-in-law and Andy Del Bondio, the gentleman I mentioned, to help me learn the vineyard business. And they're both conservative men, but they said, we need to make this thing work, and we need to grow maybe different grapes, maybe better quality grapes, and we're going to have to get more money for these grapes, and we're going to have to make them better. So how do we do that? And maybe a more permanent workforce, because at the time our workforce was transient, not quite 100%, but pretty close, and didn't come back every year, certainly, and weren't as skilled as maybe they might be if they were here. So being active in Farm Bureau, at the time, California, the state organization, Napa was a subset, owned an insurance company. So I suggested first to my father-in-law and Andy Del Bondio, why don't we get some health insurance for the workers?
That made a huge difference.
Yeah, and cover their families, or at least pay part of their families, or what have you. And these conservative men who were, in some respects were tightwads, this thing didn't blink. And we established, I went to Farm Bureau and said I wanted to do this, and they said, well, if you can sell it, we'll go along, we'll put it together, and they did. And it was, for lack of imagination, I called it California Wine Grower Foundation.
Yeah.
And legally it's still its name. It's been 50 years now since we established that.
That's cool.
And today there are something around 1,600 farm workers in the valley that have health insurance, plus their families are included. So in terms of coverage, it's something around 6,000 people.
So is that why the wine's so expensive in Napa? I'm just
No.
kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'll get to that.
I'm sure you will. So you bought the property in 1976.
No, this property, 75.
In 75.
Yeah.
Your first vintage wasn't until 1991, correct?
Yeah.
What took you so long?
Well, I was selling to other wineries, as everybody was.
Right.
I was a member of the Napa Valley Co-op. And in fact, I was a director. And we dealt with Gallo every year. Giulio Gallo in particular, who was quite a gentleman. Giulio was a good businessman, but I understood farmers how to make a living. Mm-hmm. And he was a fair man to deal with. And that, carried on for years and years. But to go back to a little earlier in times when the time we got the health insurance thing going, we started to get regular farm workers. We also, through the county, established the ability to create farm worker housing. I've got a house on the property here. Fernando Diaz lives in it with his wife and children. I can't rent that house, and I can't have anybody live in it but a farm worker. On the family ranch, at the time still have some ability left physically in construction, we built a bunkhouse for single workers that came and harvest, and we had several houses we fixed up for families live in full time, and they're still up and running. And the Ag Preserve necessitated that, and it happened, and it's still happening. And then it came the issue of grape pricing. Because wines in Napa were getting a higher price even then than anybody else. Yet Sonoma County grape growers were getting more money for the grapes, generally. Not a lot more, but some more. And then I was aware of a thing called a marketing order, which is a California piece of legislation that, when implemented, takes a given commodity like wine grapes or lettuce or what have you. Mm-hmm. But we wanted one for wine grapes, so if you've sold any wine grapes or purchased any wine grapes, you have to report to the state by law and tell them what you sold, how much, and tonnage, and how much for how much money. So all of a sudden, bingo, we have a marketing order. And then we made sure Napa County became its own district, which was District 4, still is to this day. Sonoma County became District 5. From one year to the next, Napa Valley had the highest priced grapes in the Western Hemisphere. Because if you wanted to put Napa Valley on the label, or a subset, say Oakville, that's where the grapes had to come from.
Yeah.
Still do.
Yeah.
And today, it's pretty crazy.
That's nuts.
But on the other hand, it's what put this valley on the map, because all of a sudden it became worthwhile to make a very good bottle of wine. Mm-hmm. And you're hard put to get a bad glass of wine in this valley today. There are some, I suppose.
Yeah.
But
2020 vintage.
Well, 2020 is its own thing, yeah. But it really goes back to the Ag Preserve.
It's funny because when people talk about Napa, first thing comes to mind, the godfather of wine is Robert Mondavi, who's right next door. Mm-hmm. Was he a big proponent of the whole ag?
No,
he was not.
He spoke. When asked put to the wall at a meeting, he said he was not in favor of it.
Really?
I was there. Yes.
Did he ever say why?
I think because all the old cronies that were buying grapes and were selling them to him, and maybe guys he known all his life. My father was in the same position. He had people that weren't too happy with him that he'd known since he was a kid.
Right.
I suppose there was pressure coming on Bob from that direction.
Right.
I don't think he wasn't out there screaming and shouting about it. They asked him one time at a meeting, and he did blurt that out. But on the other hand, he wasn't a Jack Davies going up there and really pushing for it. Mm-hmm. And that was important.
Yeah.
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 But when we the way we got to go further along on the marketing order and whatnot, we wanted an organization representing grape growers. And as I mentioned at the time, I was president of Napa County Farm Bureau. And I wanted, along with some of the locals, put together a grape growing organization. So in my living room, for several nights over a period of a few months, met with people like Virgil Gowron, Elwood Mee, Andy Beckstoffer, Bill Yeager.
Never heard of Andy Beckstoffer.
Yeah, and Andy's a good guy.
Yeah,
but we
he grows good wine, good grapes.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, not too shabby.
Yeah. But we
not too shabby.
We decided we wanted to, and Gene Trefethen, too, he was a key guy. Ed Westgate was another. We wanted a grape growers organization, and to get a grape growers organization, you had to have things like an office, a secretary,
commissioner, whatever. You know, first
So,
president and vice president, all that stuff.
Well, being president of Farm Bureau, I made a subcommittee for the Napa County Farm Bureau, and we called it the Napa Valley Grape Growers. And we got dues, so immediately I was able to hire a guy named Bob Dwyer.
Is that the name? Is the road named after?
No.
Okay.
No.
Different Dwyer.
Yeah, but Bob was a talented guy, well-spoken and likable, and I'm told a good-looking man by people like the lady I'm married to.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got Bob going, and that's when we could afford to go after the marketing order. And you mentioned Andy Beckstoffer. The big thing Farm Bureau did for me was it gave me entree to whoever was in power in Sacramento. And that would include initially, very briefly, Ronald Reagan. I didn't get to meet him personally, but I was at a very small gatherings with him.
Yeah.
But after that, it was followed by Jerry Brown, and I met with him in very small groups. And first off, promoting a farm labor law, where farm workers would be covered by a farm labor law in Napa Valley and the rest of California. And they would come under some of the same rules that National Labor Relations Law has for industrial workers. Farm workers were never covered under that. And it's one of the reasons the United Farm Workers Union were able to conduct a secondary boycott against 9 of our wineries early in the 70s because they could go to a store in New York City, put a picket line around it, say don't buy Robert Mondavi wine or whatever.
Was he one of the 9?
Yes, I believe he was. Yeah. And Charles Krug, Corbell over in Sonoma County, and Hans Cornell, who
Remember, I know that name, but
Paula Cornell, his daughter, they made sparkling wine, and Hans made sparkling.
Cornell, duh, okay.
And it was champagne again in those days, not
anymore.
No,
You can't call it champagne.
no. But the Farm Workers Union made a mistake in boycotting Hans Cornell because Hans didn't own a single grapevine. Yet he was being boycotted all across the United States. And therefore they had to have been organizing industrial workers because that's the only kind he had. And we filed a national action against the Farm Workers Union in 17 districts the same day, at the same time, all at once, through a lawyer in San Francisco named Wes Fastiv. And they lost because we had brochures, we had shouting about it. So they were conducting a boycott that they really weren't allowed to use. And that, in and of itself, stopped that. However, I got to know Cesar Chavez pretty well, and he was a very nice gentleman.
Wine drinker?
I don't know. I can't say I ever served
Yeah.
him a glass of wine, but I don't know that he wasn't for sure.
Right.
A very, as I say, a nice gentleman. And I'd have to say, when I met him, this boycott was still going on, and I did a couple of national TV hookups where I was discussing things with him, or debating, I guess you'd say. But when I first met him, we walked up to each other, shook hands, and he says, "Yeah, Ren, nice to meet you. I hear you got some good things going on up in Napa Valley." He was referring to the health insurance plan. And I said, "Yeah, Caesar, if you'd come up and lead a march or a fast or something once in a while, it'd help me promoting new members." And he said, "I'll see what I can do." But it was, it wasn't, we didn't disagree with each other as to what was good for farm workers. What we disagreed was who should have to pay for that. If somebody was willing to do it, which I was and other Valley farmers were, why do they need a union? And the other big thing that the union had working against them is they didn't want illegals. And that was a pretty hard thing to pull off with a union,
Right.
where most of your potential workforce were illegal.
Right.
And that kind of tied their hands in a very significant way.
Right.
And I suspect it's still maybe one of the rules, but I think that ship has kind of sailed, and really, they're still a union, but
Yeah.
but not as big as they might have been had they not had that. And I suppose people like the farmers in Napa Valley doing their own thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, in going through the marketing order scene, Andy Beckstoffer and I made appointments with through Farm Bureau's connections to meet with the State Board of Agriculture and sit down and start pushing for this marketing order. And I remember we sat at a big, long conference table with the Board of Agriculture on each side, and it's like he and I playing ping pong, bouncing our arguments back and forth.
Oh, my God.
And Andy decided that, there's some guys from Mirasu, well, they have wineries. They've got a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Like we didn't. But anyway.
Yeah.
But they disqualified themselves, and we got it passed.
Wow.
And a lot of that, I think, has to do with financially where the grape and wine business is now, and hence property values and all that.
Yeah.
And the Ag Preserve
Yeah.
was a guaranteed success.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that Ag Preserve legislation, the document pertaining to it, is probably, short of my marriage license, the most important one in my life.
Oh, my Lord. You know, it's amazing. You've been married for over 50 years.
58.
58 years.
6th of February, yep.
You know what's even crazier? I don't know of any other winery. You've only had one winemaker.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And a pretty good one, too. I mean, the wines were delicious.
Yeah.
I didn't want to talk while I was drinking them. They're that good. See, I mean, that's not normal to have the same winemaker for as many years as you've had.
Well, you see, it's the same way you have a successful marriage. The same way I have a successful winemaker. My wife and I have never both wanted a divorce at the same time. and neither have Heidi and I. So it's worked out.
This is Life Lessons with Luke, starring Ren Harris. So how did you decide on Heidi Barrett? I mean, she is a well-regarded, well-known winemaker. We've had her daughter on the podcast.
Yeah. Well,
why
her dad helped me lay out this winery. I knew him first. And Dick Peterson is still making wine. He's 93, I believe now. And
that's crazy.
So I had a connection there.
Was he Ravenswood?
He was at Beaulieu.
Boy, okay.
And others. I knew him when he was at Beaulieu.
Okay.
And we, one of the people we sold a property to is a gentleman by the name of Gustave Dallavalli. Quite a character. His daughter Maya now runs the show. But Jeannie and I are talking about both having wineries. Jeannie started Screaming Eagle Winery. My crew, some of them are still working for me today.
That's crazy.
Were working for her back in the 1990-91 when she bought her place and started planning. But Jeannie and I both started talking about making wine and talking to Gustav, and Gustav was a professional Italian. He became a good personal friend to Jeannie and I both, and we were and he was right out. He started screaming Heidi's name. I knew who she was, and I probably would have called her anyway. But Gustav was jumping up and down. You had to have Jeannie, and I had to have her as our winemaker, period. And we both did, and it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
But that's how it got launched, and then.
And she stuck with you.
Yeah. Like I say, we both never wanted a divorce at the same time.
How much do you have any influence on kind of stylistically or what things you want to see, or you just kind of grow it and let her do her thing?
It's not that simple. We have the advantage here at Paradigm of growing everything we make wine from. We don't purchase any grapes. We sell a few, not too many, but that gives us control over what is done. And I consider myself a farmer, not a winemaker.
Yep.
And we bring in a very good quality grape. We don't bring any problems to Heidi that we can avoid in the vineyard, and there are several you can avoid. And a lot of people buy grapes farmed by custom farmers who have absentee owners of their winery facilities, and there's not quite that hands-on control over what comes in. But our approach to our wine, this is, I don't know if you, this is a map of the vineyard, but all these kind of salmon-colored blocks are Cabernet, and there's 11 of them. And they're 6 different clones of Cabernet on 5 different rootstocks. That adds some complexity. We also grow Cabernet Franc, Zinfandel, Petit Verdot, and Merlot. And over the years, we've been very fortunate in opportunities for plant material. Instead of going up the road as we did years ago when we were going after volume to your nearest neighbor who had the biggest tonnage around and getting cuttings from him, we got more selective. The original Cabernet here was known as the C clone, S-E-E, after Mary C., the lady that had the candy company. She had a couple of sons whose foreman farmed for her son, and they bought in what we call a suitcase clone, cuttings in their suitcases illegally.
John Caldwell.
Yeah, well,
he taped them to himself, though, didn't he?
There's a story.
Yeah, there's a story that he taped him to his leg. He said he had a gimpy leg.
Yeah. But anyway, but that's how they started getting, and we had some C clone here. It's now been cleaned up once again by the university. It's now clone 30, but it's where it came from. Similarly, our Merlot came from Chateau Petrus.
Really?
Yeah. And
they make a decent Merlot.
You think?
Supposedly.
If you got $5 or $6 grand to buy it.
Well, yeah, I don't. I've never had it before. I don't think I ever will, and that's okay.
I've tasted it. I can't say I bought any. But but I think it was Peter Newton, that was one of the founders of Sterling. He bought it over in the mid to the early 70s.
Illegally.
Yeah, probably. In a suitcase, another suitcase clone. And I knew about it, and he planted it at a place called Bear Flat, just north of St. Lena. And I went to him and said, can I buy some cuttings from you? He says, "Oh, just give them to you." I knew he would.
Yeah.
But
you had no money in your wallet.
And we planted the Bear Flat clone here. We still call it the Bear Flat clone. And right now, in one of these spots here,
so the Merlot I had is Petrus cuttings.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're replanting one block for the third time to the same clone on the same rootstock, because it's been so successful for us. We make our rosé from it, which that small block we farm slightly differently, but it's a wonderful Merlot.
Do you ever tell Petrus that you have some of their cuttings?
He knows it. He verified how I said I told my guy. He says, "Oh yeah, I gave it to him back in '72 or '3 or something."
Seriously?
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh, Christian's a good guy. His wife's a sweetheart.
That's crazy.
He's kind of a quiet guy, very nice guy, but soft-spoken. And she's a very sweet lady, but she has a lot to say. More than he does. But.
Give me one word to describe Napa when you first started. One word.
Friendly.
Give me one word to describe Napa now.
Friendly.
It still is.
For me, yeah. It's a different circle of people, but the people around, when you go to the supermarket or at my age, the doctor's office, you kind of see a lot of people you know.
Yeah.
And I meet about 100 people a week here. I make a point to greet all our visitors.
Awesome.
At Paradigm, and as we're sitting at our tasting table.
Awesome.
And it's we haven't gone Disney, and you can't buy food here or T-shirts or what have you. But
I can't buy a T-shirt after this?
No, we don't have those.
I was disappointed.
Yeah.
I was going to buy everybody a T-shirt.
but people. I can't say I remember 100 people I meet every week, but when my wife and I performed at Carnegie Hall just before Thanksgiving, where the Oakville group went over there. I poured wine. That's how I performed.
Yeah, nice.
But on my way through the airport, this I can't help myself sometimes. But anyway, a woman comes up to me and says, "You look just like Ren Harris." And I go, "Well, other people have told me that, but he's actually a lot better looking." And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, yeah." And all she goes,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's...
So it hasn't changed for you?
No, it really hasn't. And I don't think I'm unique.
You know what? I'm happy to
way.
hear that.
Yeah.
Because ever since I've been coming to Napa for 20 years, it's changed in the sense of buildings, maybe some personalities, but the heart and the root of it, no pun intended, the root of it, it's still the same. You see it when you go to Seavey, or you go to, even like Jeff Smith, whose dad, you might know of his dad.
Oh, yeah. No,
the Laird family, the Keenans, the Corleys. Yeah. You might have known Jay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I think that even some of the Mondavi kids, that grew up here.
Yeah. My wife went to school with Mike Mondavi.
So right there.
Yeah.
Violet Gergich. I've had her on the podcast.
Yeah.
Mike is a staple. In more than one word, but that is good that the core of Napa is still, in your opinion, you've been here for 58 harvests.
I'm 81 years old, and I
28.
Come here every day.
Yeah.
I'm here about 40 hours a week, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
And people come up to me, every so often, say they want to buy the place. You're getting old, even. And I say, well, you're going to have to talk to my widow. And I'm serious.
Yeah.
I'm being a smart guy, but
yeah,
I'm serious.
You love it.
Yeah. And truth is, it's in trust to a couple of grandkids. And,
good. Have any of your grandkids shown an interest?
Well, I have grandson Kevin is he probably chose his college by where the skiing was best, but
he's a smart kid.
Yeah. But he also has taken ag economics and
good.
viticulture and enology.
So he does have an interest.
I think so. Yeah.
Because that's the beautiful thing about a family business. And I have no disrespect to any of the family that don't want to do it, and I respect them for getting out of it and maybe finding their own path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's good that there is going to be the legacy will live of Paradigm.
Yeah. And if it's set up so if Kevin doesn't want to do it, he can reap some rewards, but it'll still stand farming because we've got the next. I'm going to tumble it right into my wife's family.
Yeah.
Or we will, I should say. if that doesn't work out. And
Yeah.
it's we're big enough, and
I've got $40 in my pocket if you're willing to sell it.
yeah.
I mean, maybe I can buy that plate from you.
There you go. There you go.
Ren, thank you so much, man.
You
I mean,
bet.
that was interesting. That was captivating. That was historic. And I appreciate you spending the time. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow, rate, review, whether it's on Instagram, follow us, or Facebook, or just subscribing on YouTube or any of the podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So we'll be back next week with another Cork and Taylor podcast. Don't forget about Silvadore Brands, who is the official wine preserver of the Cork and Taylor podcast. Keep drinking the good stuff.